and that in both senses. I want to apologize for failing to do my subject justice, and I want to defend myself against certain accusations. Whatever weaknesses remain in this book, they are not because of laziness. But the second reason is the more important, and it will take some explaining. To understand it, I'll need to tell you something about those 35,000 words that I had to abandon or rework. After attempting some of the other structures, I settled on the theme of dualisms as the structure to unpack Lewis. The word dualism simply means two-ism. A dualism distinguishes between two things that are not identical. Not all dualisms are created equal. There are what we might call both-and dualisms or either-or dualisms. In either-or dualisms, the two things in question are mutually exclusive. This usually means that one of them is good and the other is bad. Thus, we must make a choice between them. Both-and dualisms, on the other hand, identify two good things we may distinguish but must not separate. Instead, we must embrace them both. These two types of dualism run throughout Lewis's writings. For example, body and soul, enjoyment and contemplation, God and self, pride and humility. Because of our sinfulness, we are constantly mixing up the two varieties. When faced with a both-and dualism, we regularly choose one side over the other. We turn it into an either-or. On the other hand, when faced with a true either-or dualism, we try to keep both things. We refuse to make a choice. Much of Lewis's writings may be seen as an attempt to correct this fundamental confusion. If we are discussing a both-and dualism, Lewis will dissuade us from choosing one and rejecting the other. He will try to keep us from becoming Martin Luther's drunken peasant, who is always falling off one side of his horse or the other. Thus, Lewis will urge the wedding of reason and imagination. If we are discussing an either-or dualism, he will insist that we make a choice. We must not be like the people of Israel, halting between two opinions, or the disciples of Jesus, attempting to serve two masters. Thus, Lewis will write of the great divorce between heaven and hell. Once you've learned to recognize the two types of dualisms, you will find them everywhere in Lewis's writings. Thus, I initially chose to organize this book around the two types of dualisms. The first part would have been devoted to both-and dualisms. It would have been called the givens, since these are the features of reality that are simply there, and that we ought to receive as gifts from God. These include reason and imagination, enjoyment and contemplation, nature and arch-nature or supernature, creator and creature, theory and reality, poetry and science, eternity and time, predestination and free will, masculinity and femininity, body and soul, pleasures and joy, with a capital J. The second part would have covered either-or dualisms, and I would have called it the choice. I say the choice and not the choices because Lewis believed that in the end, the choice is singular, even if it comes to us in a variety of guises. There are many manifestations of the choice, but at bottom it is the same. This fundamental choice I call God versus self. Now, in one sense, this is a both-and dualism. Both God and self are good and should be embraced. But the choice in question is which of these will be at the center. Will it be God or will it be ourselves? That is the fundamental choice. From there, we would have seen how this choice appears in any number of other dualisms: angels versus demons, pride versus humility, maturity versus autonomy, self-knowledge versus morbid introspection, and beauty versus utility. The choice appears in our family life, where it becomes affection versus possession. It shows up in our sexual lives, where it is eros versus lust. And it is in our social lives, where it is friendship versus the inner ring and membership versus equality. In our pleasures, it is deciding between self-restraint and repeated indulgence, what Lewis called encore. In our view of ourselves, it takes the form of good pretending versus bad pretending. And of course, in the end, the choice leads us inexorably toward either heaven or hell. These chapters would have been punctuated by a number of narratives.